Hey everyone, let's jump right into this. Today we're taking a completely different angle on the Chernobyl disaster. We are stripping away the complex Soviet politics, the propaganda, and all that historical drama you usually hear about. Instead, we are zeroing in purely on the absolutely terrifying yet wildly fascinating mechanical engineering flaws that actually caused the whole thing. Picture us just sketching this out on a whiteboard together. Because when you really break it down, this disaster, it wasn't some unpredictable act of nature. It was the direct result of very specific, highly traceable design choices. So, let's get right into it. Put yourself right in the control room. It's exactly 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986. Inside Reactor 4, the power gauge is completely lying to the operators. The needle is sitting perfectly in the green. It says low, safe, totally normal. But underneath that massive graphite core, the pressure is secretly skyrocketing past literally anything the original engineers ever designed for. A control room operator reaches for one specific button, the ultimate failsafe that's supposed to save everyone, and he presses it. Now, for 4 seconds, absolutely nothing happens. And then, boom. Just 4 seconds after hitting what is basically the emergency brake, the building does something no nuclear reactor on Earth was ever supposed to do. It explodes from the inside out. A massive 1,000-ton upper shield lid is violently blown straight off the reactor, chucking steel and concrete into the night sky like it's confetti. Seriously, how does a safety button become a detonator? Well, to figure that out, we have to rewind a bit. Let's look at part 1, the missing wall. Back in the 1970s, there was this massive, insatiable demand for cheap, abundant power. And that led to the creation of the enormous RBMK reactor. We're talking about a bare 20-story block grid. Think about a standard Western reactor for a second. It sits nestled inside an incredibly thick, steel-reinforced concrete dome, usually over 2 meters thick. That containment building has exactly one job, to be the absolute last line of physical defense. If the fuel melts, or if the pipes burst, that dome holds the deadly radiation inside. But the RBMK reactor? No dome. Zip. The RBMK was simply too tall, way too wide, and honestly way too expensive to wrap up in a standard containment shell. So Soviet designers made an absolutely fatal engineering assumption. They skipped the containment wall completely just to save some cash, mathematically assuming the core itself would simply never fail catastrophically. They essentially built confidence into the design instead of a physical wall around it. You know what it's like? It's exactly like balancing a chair on just one leg and blindly assuming nobody is ever going to bump into it. They left the reactor with zero final line of defense. And as we all know, that assumption was dead wrong.
That brings us to part 2, the control rod flaw.
Look, skipping the containment wall is really only half the story here. To grasp why the core itself actually failed, we need to go straight inside the belly of the beast and look at the chemistry and physical design of that emergency shutdown system. Inside this massive grid, you had 211 control rods. On paper, their job is super straightforward. In an emergency, they slide down into the core, they absorb neutrons, slow the nuclear reaction down, and cool the whole system off. It's the ultimate safety brake, right? Well, there was a massive, fatal catch in how these specific rods were manufactured. These rods were not solid neutron absorbers from top to bottom. They had a hidden flaw. At the very bottom of each rod was a 3-foot tip made of solid graphite. And here's the chemistry of why that is absolutely terrifying. Inside the core, water absorbs neutrons, but graphite does the exact opposite. It massively boosts the reaction. It essentially acts like a matchstick. When a rod is pulled all the way out, that graphite tip sits at the bottom, displacing the water. So when you slam the rod back in, that graphite tip enters the core first, before the actual absorbing material can get there. Meaning, for a few critical heart-stopping seconds, inserting the safety rod doesn't stop the reaction. It actively spikes it. In the engineering world, this hidden flaw is known as the positive scram effect.
All right, moving on to part 3, the night it lined up.
Fast forward to April 25th. A delayed routine test was handed off to an unfamiliar shift of operators. These guys were stepping into a control room running a reactor that was already acting super strange. Let's rapidly walk through this cascade of mechanical failures. First, to run the test, they had to lower the power, but they overshot, and the power plummeted into a dangerously low, unstable zone the RBMK was simply never meant to operate in. Second, to desperately compensate and force that power back up, the operators pulled almost all the control rods completely out of the core. This completely violated safety rules and left the reactor absolutely defenseless. Third, at 1:23 a.m.,
power starts unexpectedly spiking out of control. So the operator panics and slams that emergency AZ5 button. And finally, step 4. All those rods drop back down. But remember what's at the bottom of them? Yep, the graphite tips enter the core. I want you to paint this horrifying picture in your mind. The operator hits AZ5, the very button designed to save their lives. But because nearly every single rod had been completely withdrawn, hitting that button caused all 211 graphite tips to slide into the already overheating, highly unstable core at the exact same fraction of a second. It was literally like throwing 211 matchsticks into a powder keg simultaneously.
Instead of a screeching emergency stop, this created a massive, coordinated, reactor-wide reactivity spike. All that graphite displaced the neutron-absorbing water instantly. In just a matter of seconds, the power violently surged to over 100 times the reactor's normal output. The fuel rods themselves literally shattered under the instantaneous heat and pressure.
The steam pressure just exploded the channels. Now let's clear something up right now. There's a really common misconception out there that the reactor was missing its roof during construction. That is 100% false. The upper shield lid was physically there, but the resulting massive steam and hydrogen explosions from that spike were so violently powerful, they literally blew the 1,000-ton lid right off the building. The very door this disaster needed shut was flipped right into the sky, completely exposing the burning, highly radioactive graphite core directly to the open air. Which leads us to part 4, rules written in blood. In those crucial, chaotic hours right after the explosion, plant management fundamentally did not even believe the core had exploded. Crazy, right? But why? Because officially, on their paperwork, in their safety case, this kind of failure was deemed mathematically impossible. Because they couldn't comprehend that a catastrophic failure had actually occurred, it led to incredibly chaotic and tragic recovery efforts. Firefighters were sent straight onto a highly radioactive roof with absolutely zero protocol for what they were facing. When the extreme radiation literally fried the circuits of remote robots, hundreds of thousands of human liquidators had to be brought in. Helicopters were desperately flying over, dropping sand, lead, and boron just to smother the fire. Ultimately, a massive concrete sarcophagus was hastily poured over the ruin, basically doing the job a permanent containment shell should have done from day one. And globally, every single remaining RBMK reactor was immediately redesigned. Those dangerous graphite tips were completely stripped out, and strict hardware limits were enforced so operators could literally no longer drop power into that unstable zone.
So the crucial point we really need to take away from this entire explainer is this exact concept. It is the absolute ultimate philosophical engineering lesson of Chernobyl. A safety case is not a piece of paper that confidently says, this cannot happen. No, a real safety case is saying, here is the physical wall we built for the exact moment it does. You never, ever build a complex system assuming it won't fail. You design it around the absolute certainty that someday, somehow it will fail, and you build that wall anyway.
So, I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. What guardrails quietly keep you safe today? Seriously. Every single redundant switch, every annoying little safety roll you roll your eyes at, every unnecessary inspection in your daily life, they all exist because somewhere, somehow, a disaster proved it was strictly necessary. Major disasters rarely happen because of one big supervillain. They happen when small, boring flaws, like a missing wall and a 3-foot graphite tip, line up perfectly. Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me. Make sure you subscribe so our next complex breakdown doesn't catch you off guard. Keep questioning the systems around you, and I'll catch you next time.